I wanted to welcome you to Outsmarting a Tight Market, hosted by the Buffalo News and Howard Hanna. I'm your host, Thea Teopeck, and we all know, everyone on this call, it is a challenging time to buy a house right now. As the Buffalo News just reported last week, the median home price in Western New York has jumped more than 25% over the past 2 years, which is insane. I know that pain and struggle. My husband and I have been looking for our dream home since 2016, and the supply of houses has been steadily shrinking. Inventory is lower than ever as more and more people are looking and as the prices just skyrocket. So we're here today to figure out what's causing these large increases in this market that's historically been slow to grow. Will these prices stick? Is it a post-COVID thing? Is it an inflation-related bubble? Most importantly, are there things that you can do now to find your dream house at a price that you can afford? Today's webinar will provide tips and strategies to get ahead of the pack and recognize a great buy when you see one. We have 3 experts here today representing different Western New York communities to give you all the answers that you're looking for. And I'd like to introduce them now. First, we have Donna Littlefield, who's manager of the Crossroads branch in Amherst. Donna's been selling real estate for 12 years and specializes in Amherst, Wheatfield, Pendleton, and Niagara County, which covers all the great school districts, among them in Western New York. Welcome, Donna. Next is Curtis Newrider, manager of the Orchard Park branch. Curtis has been in the market for more than 22 years and specializes in the South Towns area. And our third, last but not least, panelist is Jonathan Orlow, who is the manager of the Clarence Amherst office and has been in residential real estate for 14 years. And fun fact, as a senior in high school, Jonathan worked for Curtis, and now all these years later, they're colleagues. Full circle moment. Here we are today.
Yes.
Welcome, the 3 of you. So they're all very excited to answer all of your questions. One more thing before we begin, I'd like to give you a brief overview of how we're going to structure the next hour and how you can participate. First, we plan on going through some of our cover story topics on local real estate and address some of the questions that you all pre-submitted. And as we go, I invite you to type in all your questions in the chat feature, and we will ask those throughout this live chat. We want it to be beneficial for you, and I will ask them to our panelists, and then we'll open it up to a live question and answer at the end. So let's get started. There is so much competition right now for the same properties. What are some general strategies that you all recommend to get ahead of the pack?
Oh, we're not all going to start at once.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Donna,
who wants to take this one?
Start talking. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. You go, Jonathan, and I'll go right on your coattails.
I think for anybody that's looking for a home in this market, the first thing is working with an experienced full-time real estate agent. Having somebody to be able to navigate the market, and a company like Howard Hanna with our size and scale, we have a lot of networking in between our offices, and we know of inventory that's going to be hitting the market all across Western New York. And we've got a very strong pulse on what's to be coming.
Yeah, representation is huge. You need solid representation. You need a qualified realtor that knows the industry. And I think that having a plan is super important, and having an agent or a realtor putting that plan into motion. And there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to purchasing a home.
I can't agree more. It all starts with the right representation, that being, a full-time realtor that works in the market, that knows the inventory, that knows the path that needs to be taken. And I think that, that's other than trying to manage your own frustration. And again, that's something that we help with as well.
So at Howard Hanna, you guys are very uniquely set up that, Donna covers Niagara County, and Curtis, you cover your area, and Jonathan covers Clarence and Amherst. How is that a benefit to someone who's looking for a real estate agent that you guys specialize in certain counties versus a real estate agent that covers all of Western New York?
I think, two things. I think there are a lot of very good agents that are well-informed, both here in the South towns and the North towns. We find a lot of times that that buyers may be looking for a certain price range in a community that maybe mirrors Clarence. So sometimes we see them down here in Orchard Park. So in as much as, we do have agents that specialize in the towns that we're in, there are still a lot of them that sort of know other markets. Go ahead. Anyone else want to jump in?
I think to that point, Curtis, which I agree with. I mean, I know Western New York as well. The agents in my office go north and south towns quite often. However, living in, the name of my office is Crossroads, and it's called Crossroads because I sit right on the border of Niagara and Erie County. So, I'm born and raised in Buffalo. Do I know the Buffalo market? Sure, I do. But I live here in Niagara County. I live in Pendleton. And most of these agents here as well live in this area. And I would say 80% Niagara County. And just being in your area, living in your area, again, your pulse is on the market. So you're very, very well aware of what's, I mean, something goes up down the street from me. I don't even have to go inside. I'm going to tell you what's going to go on the market for. So it does help. But again, Curtis has a point. You can easily, we're Western New Yorkers, and we're well educated in how to do the comps and figure out the cost. So, to Curtis's point, yes.
I think what's nice about our company is because we have offices in every community.
Mhm.
I go to the same coffee shop, Wegmans, every day. I actually commute from Orchard Park to my office on Sheridan Drive. So I'm in the North towns and the South every day. But, we see the same people who live in our neighborhoods, whether we're out at the coffee shop, at the gas station. And one of the big conversations we're having with people in the community right now, for anybody that owns a home, is what would be your dream scenario to sell your house? Because in this market, really, it can be quite possible. If somebody needs more time that they want to stay in their house, if they think they're going to be making a move out of state, we can really help sellers achieve that flexibility. And in turn, that provides us with a listing inventory to bring to our buyers at Howard Hanna.
Great answers. We had a viewer question come in. Do people miss out on listings when they don't have a realtor?
Whew,
Absolutely.
whew. I'm going to tell you something. If you don't have, I'm sorry, Jonathan,
No, go.
Absolutely.
I like it. You got the hands. You're like, if
Oh,
you
very
don't
passionate
have,
about this
if
question.
you don't have a realtor.
You have, I mean, just being, and I say this honestly, if you don't have an agent, you're screwed. That's how I feel. And I've seen it happen. No,
A good
honestly,
agent, a good agent. You're
right?
You're really
A good
screwed.
agent,
Yeah.
because it's such a fast-paced market right now. And we set you up in a there's a million and one things that we do. So for example, I had somebody call here and asked about a listing sold like 3 days ago, but the database is out there. I won't mention any names so I don't get in any trouble, but the database is out there that pull from us, that take all of our information and sell it to the market, are behind. So we are, if you've got a listing that's going in and you are on our drip, you're going to get it within 10 seconds of it hitting the market. There's a million and one reasons. That's one. Jonathan, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think, one of the other benefits of having an agent, and I think one of the most exciting parts of our job, is really getting to know our buyers and trying to suggest houses or locations that might not be in their primary location, and trying to show them different neighborhoods, different housing styles. And oftentimes we're able to help people find something better than what they thought or different than what their initial search criteria was.
I love what you just said. Oh, sorry, Curtis, go ahead.
To Jonathan's point, that's why we offer our buyers a counseling session and really spend a lot of time in helping them discover exactly what they want. And I always use the example, somebody says, a buyer says, well, I want to buy a house with some land. All right. So, but what does that mean? And so, by probing, you could find out that they mean land because they want some privacy. Well, there are certainly properties out there that don't include acreage, but are still very private. So, I think that again, that's one of the benefits of working with a realtor.
Along the lines of what you were saying, Jonathan, what are some of those untapped markets that, that people might not be thinking of? Maybe for me, for instance, I'm focusing on the Elmwood Village, but maybe I should be looking, we do look on the west side too, but in your experience, what are some other untapped markets that would help this group in their house hunt search?
One of the things that I look at, it's what's the untapped market for that specific buyer. I was working with an agent and a client that was very motivated to find a home this spring, and they were looking primarily in East Aurora and Orchard Park. And for them, a great option was to go into Elma, looking at one of the lowest tax rates within Erie County. They were able to stretch their budget significantly. So we try to look at, based on what somebody's affordability is, what the tax rates are in different communities, and if someone can stretch their budget, or maybe adjust their search criteria a little bit.
I'm seeing a lot of popularity in what I sort of call the third ring around the city, and some real good opportunities in, Alma, for instance, Eden, North Collins, up that way. Where there might not be quite as much competition, and you can get a little bit more, home for your money.
One of the ways that we've been able to strengthen the business in our office this winter in the slower times of year is myself as the manager and my agents, we've been networking with estate attorneys, and we've found a huge backup in the probate process as a result of the pandemic. Particularly individuals that passed away and didn't have wills, to have, the courts appoint an administrator of the estate. So we've kept our market inventory very healthy with homes in this slower time of year. Also, I think it's given buyers a great opportunity because in some cases, these sellers are looking for as-is transactions where the estate is not able to make repairs. And it's a great opportunity for a buyer to come in and put sweat equity in the house and feel that they can grow their investment immediately.
And we're 2 years into this pandemic now. We're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, with just numbers going down in our local hospitals. What kind of homes are your clients looking for, 2 years into this pandemic? How has that changed in year two of this, the types of homes that your clients were looking for 2 years ago versus now?
I think one of the sectors of the market that I've seen change drastically, and we've started to see a rebound, I'm going to kind of answer in the reverse of this. But earlier in the spring and in the summer, we did have a slowdown with the condo market and condos that had common hallways. And I've seen that in different condo buildings in the city of Buffalo, along Delaware, the Elmwood Village, the Waterfront Village. And I think for so long, people thought, the city is so hot, it's impossible to get in. But we've been able to take buyers that were searching in Williamsville and bring them to the city and show them affordability. Where just the perceptions were completely different. So I think, buyer interests changing. People were looking for more land or more outdoor space than what they had currently. So that could have meant going from an apartment to a city home, could have meant going from the city to, a home with acreage in Orchard Park or in Niagara County. So I think we've seen a progression there.
I've seen some more emphasis on ancillary homes, ancillary rooms in homes, rooms that can be isolated for a family member to be working there, and or a child that is learning online. So obviously everybody likes the idea of a great space where everybody can get together. But there's been a lot of thought into, okay, exactly now that I'm working at home, I'm going to need my space. Little Johnny or Susie are going to need their space. So it's sort of changed the dynamic, the search dynamic a little.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I've been finding a lot, the fourth bedroom or the finished basement, if they can finish the basement. I think everybody's preparing for, hopefully this will never happen again, but in case, and I think a lot of our lives work-wise have changed, and people that never worked from home are now working from home full time, and that may not ever change. So those are, I agree with both Jonathan and Curtis. Those are a lot of different changes going on, having land, wanting to be more suburban or more rural. Those are all a lot of common things.
We had a question just come in. So does that mean the open concept of a home is not as popular as it used to be?
No.
I think, it depends, on the individual, but in general, if you have a very open concept floor plan and you don't have, I would say, 2 separate office spaces, where you're looking for a household with multiple individuals, spouses, kids. However, people are looking for more individual space.
I don't think that open floor plan is ever going to go away. I don't see that dissipating. I think an open floor plan is not relevant to having an office. Or a separate space or a finished basement or an addition. I don't think the open floor plan is going to go anywhere. So if you're worried and you have an open floor plan, it's still a hot commodity.
Another question, with there being such a competitive market right now, how do you make your offer stand out the most? Is there a set price above the initial listing price that houses are likely to go for right now? Tough question.
I don't believe so. But one of the things that we pride ourselves in my office, I'm a big tech guy, so I have my computer screen and a dual monitor with the agents, and we really research the comparable sales, and we take a multifaceted approach. The first thing that I look at is, what are the historic sales in the area within the past 3 months? I'll go out 6 months, and then I like to see relative to the market, where does this fall in the all-time history? Is this the most expensive house or the least expensive? We really want to empower our consumers, and especially in this market, and have them understand, where the market has changed price-wise in that neighborhood. And then I look and see, how far over asking are homes selling in that neighborhood? Is there an uptrend where there hasn't been enough demand and we're looking at sometimes 20% over asking? Or has that neighborhood had enough comparable sales where that home might be listed very close to its max value?
Another question just came in. I'm someone who checks listings online daily. What sets a good agent apart from the rest? What can you do for me?
So, a lot of what we do is, prospecting for listings. There's a lots of times, especially in an office of my size, where we're aware of listings before they even go on the market. And so there is a network of agents that work on their relationships to discover houses that we anticipate being on the market but are not on the market yet.
I think having a full-time, dedicated, educated, seasoned, and when I say seasoned, I don't mean, I've been in the business for 30 years, but I've done 2 contracts. I mean, somebody that's, has a lot of experience, has sold a lot of homes. When you ask the question, what can I do for you? Well, it's all about knowledge. And I know it's a cliche, but knowledge is power. So the more that you know about the industry, the more sales that you've done, the more contracts, the more, and it's dedication to your client. If I know if I have a client or an agent in my office has a client, I mean, we're working 24/7. We don't shut our phones down. So there's a lot of different things that bring a good agent to the table.
And I think one of the things that I've talked about a lot in my sales meetings with agents in 2022 has been how the agent conducts themselves with other agents. And, you know, you see $1 Million Listing on Bravo and people throwing drinks at each other on TV and these dramatic reality shows. And I guess in Buffalo, maybe you would throw like a local craft beer on someone. But really, there are real estate agents in the nature of being an independent contractor where people can be tougher and they feel that they can get away with it. And you see agents that, you know, are kind of butting heads on different transactions. And that comes back to haunt people. You know, we really pride ourselves in having positive relationships. So if we're representing a buyer, the listing agent is saying, I want to work with Donna. She's a pleasure to do a deal with.
100%. I think I always tell, I always say the same thing to my agents, get along with everybody because you are going to see them somewhere down the road. So you want to have good relationships, and that does help. I mean, there's so many reasons why you want to get a good full-time agent. I mean, there's just a zillion reasons, and you should interview. You should interview. Have your pad and paper there. Ask your questions and be comfortable with your agent. You know, they're going to become your family.
Buffalo is one big living room, 2 degrees of separation.
Oh yeah.
So for years we've been hearing the bubble's going to burst. Just wait another year. When do you guys see that bubble bursting? Or is this going to be like this for the next year where we're just seeing homes selling for 200 over ask that need $100,000 of work? What are you guys kind of forecasting in the market?
You know, there is no doubt that we are in uncharted waters here. And again, no one has a crystal ball. You know, I think that, you know, for many years, Buffalo was sort of, underpriced and of value. So, you know, a lot of us think that we're sort of catching up with the rest of the world with that. I think, you know, we used to talk about 3 or 4% appreciation a year up until about 2018. So, you know, there's no doubt that, there's been a huge spike, but it's funny. So, you know, I always get that question, and it reminds me of the time that I was speaking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about Microsoft stock, and back in 2018, and there was a short period of time in which the stock had spiked, and he said to me, "Oh no, it's a bubble. Wait, don't jump in." Well, it never went any lower. So you just don't know. I'd say you've got more protection if you're planning on staying in your house longer.
I think the market's really just catching up with itself. You know, it's not a scary market. I mean, our value has gone up, and I believe it's playing catch up. It's where it should be, you know. And listings, it's obviously, you know, skeletal listings, but and multiple offers are still multiple offers. But I would say how long we've been in multiple offers for the past how many years? I mean, it really hasn't gone away. It's just starting to catch up with itself.
I hear from a lot of baby boomers. What would you say to them that want to sell their home, but they're like, where will I go? What do you say to a client like that wants to sell their home and downsize, but then they don't know if they can afford to buy a smaller home in this market?
That's where a good agent comes in. You know, there's reverse contingencies. There's different ways that we do the contract. I'm not an attorney, but I know the contract as well as my colleagues here. We know the contract very, very well. So, I mean, there's different ways to approach this. There's maybe selling your home, again, reverse contingency without, I don't give you my home. You don't purchase my home. We don't close on my home until I find a home. There's all different ways to go about it. And again, knowing that contract terms and conditions, understanding it prior to attorney approval is very, very important.
One of the ways that, again, trying to network for inventory, and we call it the shadow market, the houses that are kind of out there that we know could be coming on the market. I've networked a lot with my agents this past year with different assisted living communities and nursing homes where there's individuals on wait lists that they're anticipating to move into the facilities within 3 to 8 months. And when their name gets called, they have to sell their home extremely quickly. So that's been a nice networking opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And, not everybody is staying in their home forever, and there are people that need to make a quick, easy sale. And I think one of the things we lose sight of sometimes in this market, and that the media doesn't say, is that there's sellers that do not want to have a parade of people through their house. They truly say to us, if you bring us someone at this price, and it's not even an unrealistic price, it's a buyer that can walk through, doesn't care about the basement looking perfect or the garage. It could be a little cluttered, just like anybody's house, and they're okay with it. So I think that's where working with a company like ours, where we're in so many different communities and have the pulse of those sellers, is beneficial.
Absolutely, I would think. We had a question come in. What is your best advice for first-time home buyers? Let's do a round robin, starting with Curtis.
Pre-qualified, and don't rely on the internet to qualify you. Go to a reputable lender whom is going to spend some time with you and ask you many questions. I think that's I think that's key, and that really sets up the whole purchase scenario. You certainly don't want to get yourself out there looking at homes that you can't afford. So that's my first advice to a first-time home buyer.
I would, when I sit down with a first-time home buyer, that's super important to counsel them. So we have, and I'm sure I can say this, but we have our own mortgage company in-house, which is phenomenal. And we can keep, our hands in the soup. And I bring that first-time home buyer in, and you want to sit down and you want to go over all of the things that they should and shouldn't be doing. Pre-approval, 100%. That's the first thing you get out of the way. But explaining all the different things. And so my son's looking for a house. He's a first-time home buyer. So I've gone over credit with him. He sat down with our mortgage broker. I'm able to sit there in the same room with the mortgage broker and the first-time home buyer that's got a million questions. So we have a concierge service here at our company that I think is super important to that first-time home buyer, and we cover all the bases.
I think one of the things that I like to look at, and I would urge first-time buyers to consider, is working with your agent and educating yourself on the different tax rates throughout Western New York. Some municipalities have a lower tax rate based on the valuation of the house. And there are communities where, you just might not expect it. We talked about Elma, where that has a really fantastic tax rate, the town of Clarence, and certainly the city of Buffalo having the most affordable tax rate in Erie County. To have that lower annual property tax, and with the low interest rates on mortgages, people are able to stretch their budgets a little bit further. And I think that sometimes when we look at, different stretches, Kaisertown, where it's close to Cheektowaga, a lot of people have chose to move there to be within the city of Buffalo and to have taxes much less. So I've seen a big spike in prices there. So I think, familiarizing yourself with tax rates in the different communities can really be an edge up.
Affordability too. I mean, what can you afford? What do you want your monthly payment to be? And that's super important. Again, looking, like Jonathan said, knowing what the taxes are going to be, your mortgage payment, principal, interest, all of those things play a role when you're a first-time home buyer or any home buyer as far as that goes.
Excellent answers for Kelsey asked that question. With so many homes having multiple offers, this is another viewer question. I've heard waiving inspection is a good way to separate yourself from other offers. I've heard that too. I'm not comfortable with that. What other options do I have to make my offer stand out aside from being pre-approved?
Yeah, I will, and I'm sorry if you, I know all of us have something to say on this one. I would say I do not ever advise no inspection. I think home inspection covers both the buyer as well as the seller. And it's an important part of the process. And the thing is, how do you present that to the agent? How do you present that inspection to the agent if you are in a multiple offer and you have an inspection and that one doesn't? Well, I always tell my seller, listen, do yourself a favor and don't be afraid of that inspection. That inspection protects you. Or do a pre-inspection. Have your seller do a pre-inspection. And have that out there. I don't, again, advise a buyer not to. Does it make them a stronger buyer? It depends on the other terms and conditions. There's all kinds of different ways to go about being savvy with your offer. And of course, it's going to be what you bring to the table as well.
I've also seen some home inspections that are set up so there's sort of a limit to the liability. So the home inspection is set up more as if it's for major defects in the house, and it's not set up for things that may be considered somewhat minor. So sort of like a modified home inspection. But I think his question had more to do with what else he can do or his agent can help him do in sharpening his offer without removing the home inspection.
Mm-hmm.
And again, now you can't submit a letter either to help your offer stand out according to New York state law. So that's something,
right.
We've lost a house in that case. We were the highest offer and we lost to a bid where the seller had wrote a letter and it sold for 30 under ask. So, I think buyers like me are just struggling with how much more can we do if we're already offering above cost, and just that feeling of hopelessness.
Yeah,
I think, go ahead, Curtis.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I really appreciate learning real estate, I started at the end of 2007, going into 2008, and I feel like I have some of the old school of real estate. But one of the things that I was taught was, having a strong earnest money deposit on the contract. And as a manager, seeing the offers come in, I'm surprised sometimes where people will be putting 20% down on a mortgage and their deposit with the seller after contingencies are met, it's less than 3%. And sometimes, the seller wants to see financial strength above and beyond, and somebody could just be increasing their deposit amount a little bit, and that really makes a big difference.
Very interesting. I've never heard that before. That's interesting.
And especially when we have multiple offers that are so close, one of the things that we go back to is looking at what is that deposit. And as experienced brokers managing offices and our agents, we really look at that. And when I'm coaching one of my realtors to help a client and a buyer that's lost a lot of offers, what can we do for that deposit that's reasonable, but also catches the seller's eye and says, these people are really serious about this house?
Question, can you further explain what the deposit is?
Sure. So on our contracts, earnest money deposit is placed typically with the listing real estate brokerage. And so it's showing the buyer's intent to carry out the transaction. I say it's their skin in the game. So after a home inspection is completed, or if there's no home inspection, it would be after attorney approval, the buyer writes a check to the seller's representation, and they hold that on the buyer's behalf. And that goes towards their closing costs and on their closing statement. So if you're going to be putting the money down anyway, I'm not suggesting that you empty your bank account, but if you're a 20% down buyer, you shouldn't be having a 3% earnest money deposit in a competitive situation. you should be looking at an appropriate deposit and having your agent counsel you on that.
Yeah, meaning more than 3% of the purchase price is what Jonathan is referring to. I know we talk in our fancy talk, but
Yeah.
right.
I
but
would
more
ask you to
than-
clarify.
Yeah, more than
Yeah.
3%, more than so it's the purchase price. And does it make a difference? Everything makes a difference. But going back to inspections, I think when you're dealing with an inspection, and if you have a really good offer, we as agents explain to our clients, both seller and buyer, the inspection isn't about going in and having a laundry list of what we want done. It's not a brand new home. It's not a brand new build. And then inspection is there for you to learn about a home that you've never been in before or you've not owned. So it's there because it's going to educate you. And I think if it's explained properly, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's to both buyer and seller. It's an important part of the process, and it's a learning experience, especially for first-time home buyers.
One of
Curtis,
the things,
did you have something? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No,
sorry.
finish your thought. Sorry.
One of the things that I like to add to a contract, depending on the purchaser, where it still gives them the right to the inspection, but helps ease the seller's mind. And this is house specific and very purchaser specific. But in the right scenario, we add language to the contract that says, purchaser will request no repairs from the seller as the result of home inspection. That still gives the purchaser the ability to cancel the contract completely as the result of the inspection. You technically could cancel and then go back and renegotiate, but it's setting an expectation with the seller that we want to do an inspection, but we're not asking you for anything.
Yeah,
we know that there's going to be repairs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think simple little things like that, I call it contract mechanics, that can really stand out and make an A+ contract.
Yeah, one other thing that that I think it could be important in getting your offer accepted or not is having a flexible closing date, because not every seller wants to move right away, and so by sending the contract back and saying, look at, we could close in 5 weeks or we could close in 10 weeks, I think, makes their offer stand out at times.
Curtis, I think that's huge. And I think that ties into the experience of the buyer's agent. And oftentimes, buyers, maybe even like yourself, Thea, they are far more flexible with closing date than what's written in the contract. And I'll say one of the surprising things that I see is when we're receiving offers on our listings and the buyer's agent never has a voice-to-voice conversation with the listing agent. It's so key for the buyer's agent to provide timely feedback of their showing, communicate with the listing agent, and not through text. I think, agents, they might not be as honest with each other when they're putting it in writing. Not that it's shady, but really talking to the agent, finding the seller's motivations, having a real conversation. It can allow the agent to give the buyer great advice and insight to be able to strengthen their offer.
These are all excellent tips. My husband is taking notes, I'm sure. Are people overpaying right now? Are these properties that are currently being sold going to hold their value in the long term?
So if I could say something, I think a lot of the worry is the appraisal, right? And we have all kinds of verbiage out there for the appraisal. If it doesn't appraise, if somebody can afford to go over or meet the appraised value, again, making it a stronger contract. But an appraisal is a mindset. It changes in 6 months. And we don't have a crystal ball to say what is it going to be like in 5 years. If you want that home and you want to pay for it, it's going to be yours. Again, who knows in 3 years what the market's going to be like. So an appraisal is a mindset. It's just a mindset to me.
I've always believed that your primary residence shouldn't be considered an investment alone. Realizing that, value in a home comes from you living in it,
Mhm.
raising your family in it, enjoying it. Now, I think everybody would like to think that when they go to sell it, it's going to be worth more than what they paid for it. But I think that that's not why people buy homes. They buy homes to live in it, to love it, to create memories in it.
Mhm.
One of the things, if somebody is conscious of, what their potential cash out is going to be on the house, and if the value will stay stable, with those clients, sometimes they have to look a little bit harder, and we want to have them in a neighborhood where the previous home sales support that price. And we look for each buyer's objective. I can think of a client that we had this summer, and although they were looking for their forever home, they were very conscious of the fact if something happened that they could get their money out of the house. And for these particular buyers, we found a little bit different location for them to go to, where it was an area that was increasing in value significantly. And they bought a house that was a fixer-upper, where just with painting this house, it looked like a Crayola crayon box of colors on the walls. Just painting it alone added instant equity. And I think one of the things for frustrated buyers out there to remember, and people who are thinking of waiting for the market to crash, we've been nervous about the market for years.
Mhm.
And you keep seeing it going up and up and up. And I'll say, personally speaking, the home that I'm in right now, sitting here doing this call from, I bought it 3 years ago, and I thought I was buying at the top of the market. And I said, I'm ready to settle down. I'm okay. I did well in my other homes, making a profit. And this house today, 3 years later, is worth over 100,000 more than what I paid for it.
Crazy. It's crazy. That's why we're here today, to outsmart this tight market and this crazy
Yes.
market. Speaking of summer, so when is a good time of year in all of your combined years of experience to buy where you don't see as many offers come in? Or what is the worst time of year? Summer, spring? Sometimes a lot of listings you see now, you can't see the backyard because it's covered in snow. So is now a good time to buy?
A good time to buy is when the buyer is ready to buy. And I can make an argument that spring is the best time. I can make an argument that the fall or the winter. And really the best time is when the buyer is ready. So, a lot of times, spring is probably our busiest market. Is that the time that a buyer wants to be in? Yes, there may be more inventory, but there are a lot more buyers in the market. Do we counsel them to look for something in some of the slower months? Well, unfortunately, there may not be as much inventory. So, I sort of go back to what the buyer, when the buyer is ready to start looking, and that's the best time for them.
Thea, you mentioned, houses being covered with snow, and, looking at this time of year, we're working with a buyer in our office and, providing some advice on a home they're purchasing. And the weather we've had this past week in Buffalo, I feel like this house has seen at least 3 seasons in the past 7 days. But where we've had the freezing and thawing and rain and snow melt, this has been a really great time for buyers to do their inspections, because you're seeing if the basement has water versus the middle of summer where everything is so dry. And I think, you get a taste for how tough that house is in a Buffalo winter, in the extreme weather that we can have. So I would tell buyers, don't be hesitant by the weather. I think that, even in the odd times of year where we're covered in snow, you can learn a lot about the house.
I think too, since the market has changed so much and the listings are so skeletal, there's no bad time to look for a home. There's no specific. Curtis hit it right on the nose when that buyer is ready, because I think winter, spring, summer, fall, this market is the market.
Actually, a fun fact, one of the highest priced home sales ever recorded in Western New York just sold, a $2.1 million stone mansion on the Hamburg Orchard Park border. Crazy. I'm going to bet.
Actually, that sale was in my office. We represented those sellers. I don't know if we, I don't think
gotcha.
We had that planned, actually. And the interesting thing with that seller is I went out with one of my brand new agents to list the neighbor's home, and they just had a professional connection. And we really spent a lot of time with the neighbor helping them. They referred us to the house next door. And when we met with that seller, gosh, 2 years ago, we were looking at 1.6 million. Then we were thinking listing at 1.8, and we listed just over 2 million, and we had a sale in 2 weeks. And interestingly enough, it was somebody that moved a mile down the street that was looking for a different version of their house. And it was someone right around the corner.
Nice job, Jonathan.
So we've got a little less than 15 minutes here. If you have any questions for those tuning in, type them in the chat. We'll get going. I'm going to batch 2 questions that came in. How commonly are people using the inspection as a negotiating tool now? And at what part of the home buying process will the inspection be done?
So I think that there was a time in a more balanced market against good agent counsel, in which sellers might have been taking advantage of a home inspection as a renegotiation tool. These days, I think that many sellers don't need to tolerate that if they think that they're being taken advantage of. On the other hand, if it is something that is a legitimate, major, a health concern, I think that sellers are still receptive to renegotiating.
And if did they ask, and I'm sorry, when the inspection takes place?
That was the
Yeah,
second
it was
time.
2 questions I combined
Yeah.
together. And then
Yeah.
the other part was, at what part of the home buying process will the inspection be done?
So the inspection is normally done, there's the contract has an order to it and a timely order to it. So the inspection is normally done after both sides receive attorney approval. So when the buyer and the seller's attorneys send out their approvals within there's everything's on a time frame. And that's how we're very educated, and we understand the time frames, we understand the contract, we understand when to get the contract in, when to get the inspection done. The sooner the better, but have your attorney approvals. Very important to have the attorney approvals in prior to the day of inspection. And then that all normally happens within a week of signature.
Okay. Next question. How should I estimate the taxes on a property? Will the taxes shown on the listing be a good reference, or should I expect to pay the taxable rate on the purchase price of the house?
One of the things that I coach my agents on, and I think it's important for every buyer's agent, and really every buyer, in case their agent isn't doing the due diligence, is to not rely on the taxes on the listing, to check with the municipality, pull the tax bills, make sure that the taxes quoted in the listing are the true taxes without any of the New York State exemptions that are out there for the STAR program, veterans discounts, senior discounts. And one of the questions we have a lot in this market is, will my taxes instantly go up based on the purchase price of the home? And that's a difficult question to answer, but it's based on the assessed value that the municipality sets. And one of the things that I look at on all homes is what percentage the municipality is using for the assessed value. So here's a for instance. In some towns in Western New York, the assessed value that the taxes are based off of equal the market value. So it's assessed at 100%. So you'll see the tax basis and the value of the house be in sync with each other. In other municipalities, they use a different equalization rate, and it's a different percentage. So, short version for buyers is have this conversation with your agents, looking at how off is that full market value that the town has on the house. Typically, a town is not going and doing a spot reassessment, but I think in many communities in Western New York, where there haven't been reassessments in a long time, you always run the risk that the town will reassess. And the last part of my long-winded answer is if you look at the city of Buffalo and where there was a citywide reassessment, every property was reassessed. So everybody went up, but the tax rate went down because the city of Buffalo budget remained the same relatively. So just because you have a reassessment, and even if it's going significantly up, it's still proportionate to everybody within that town. And it might not mean, a crazy tax hike.
I think what's important to remember too is, and if I remember the question correctly, asking about the taxes. So the selling agent represents the seller, puts the taxes in there. It is the buyer agent responsibility to make sure those taxes are correct. That selling agent works for the seller. You as a buyer agent, you work for the buyer. So you put your buyer hat on and you call the town. A lot of times there's the star credits in there, or they have the veterans tax in there. So there's all, and not everybody, if they have an assistant, not all assistants understand that. So it is, you do your due diligence as a buyer agent and you verify those taxes. That's super important. And your mortgage lender will do the same thing. Normally, we work together to make sure those taxes are correct.
Curtis, do you have something to add or?
No. just
Okay,
a smile.
no, I know. I didn't think that was
No way,
long-winded, Jonathan.
Curtis.
That was thorough. That was thorough. So is the old adage still true? Should you always buy the least expensive house on the street or in the neighborhood? You always hear from people, I don't want to have the most expensive house on the street, or is this all just not even an issue anymore? Or
I do.
You actually do, Donna. You should elaborate on that with yours, because I've been to your house.
Yeah.
And it's fabulous. And I would buy it. Most expensive house on the street.
Thanks, Jonathan. Curtis, go ahead. I see you're chomping at the bit.
No, I mean, I think that still holds true as a general rule. Let the value of your neighbor's house sort of pull yours up. But I also think that we also can see some real disparities in neighborhoods as well, where we've got one house that's been completely redone and revamped, and we'll have another house that is in need of some updating or whatnot. And so I think that people aren't quite as afraid of buying the nicest house on the street, because I think that there's plenty of other houses on the street that with some updating could be sold for, a high price too.
I think sometimes you don't want to have the most expensive, worst house on the street, where it's the most expensive and it needs everything done to it. And with the cost of materials and labors and the increase we've seen there, if someone has a home that's fully updated, that has so much value. You probably couldn't go and get a fixer-upper and do all the updates that some people have put into their homes. And it's interesting, there was a sale in Orchard Park by Hanna recently, and this was one of the first listings I ever had. This was the biggest house on the street. And it was one of my parents' friends listed their home. They took a 1,000 square foot house and put a 2,000 square foot addition. I mean, just crazy. They lived there for a long time. They loved their house. But when I sold it 14 years ago, and when it sold this year, it was the most affordable price per square foot for that size within Orchard Park. So sometimes that provides an opportunity. If you have the biggest house on your street, for buyers that are looking for size, that can be a lower price and a really great way to get into a large house.
How would you suggest finding, this just came in, how would you suggest finding an agent if you are interested in multiple areas in the Western New York area?
I'd say to call one of us, and we can direct you. We can give you some suggestions.
Yeah, we have agents that, like we had said before in the beginning, work both north and south towns. Is it good to have an agent in a certain specific area? yeah, if you're looking in the Star Point School District, sure, you would come into my office. That's where all our agents work. That's where we all work. So it would be advantageous, but then we all have agents, as Curtis says, and I know Jonathan does for sure, that go from both north to the south. So we could direct you. Yes, call one of us.
I would say, guys,
HowardHanna.com.
yeah, I just put my email in the chat, but Curtis and Donna, maybe you could throw the best contact information for yourselves in the chat for people to connect with us.
All right, we've got less than 3 minutes, so you each have a minute. What is your number one top piece of advice that we have not mentioned in this last hour on how to find your dream home, how to find your next home, your top piece of advice for someone looking? We'll start with Jonathan.
Be flexible with your criteria, find an agent that can really get to know your needs and listen to the suggestions that they have.
I think representation is huge, makes a big difference. Be prepared, have a plan, have your ducks in a row, that old saying, having your ducks in a row, having all the right people, hiring an agent that has a concierge service that can help you, and all with all the different hats that need to be worn during the whole process.
So, I would say to try to temper your emotions. And I think a lot of times we see that buyers get caught up in, do I have to have a house, and get caught up in this bidding war. And once they get the house, sometimes the reality sort of sinks in and they back out. So I think you've got to try to temper your emotion. And that's one of the things we do as realtors, is help balance the logic with the emotion.
So you can find Curtis, Donna, Jonathan, all their information at howardhanna.com. We are so delighted that all of you on this call could join us, and we hope all of your questions were answered today. Of course, Donna, Curtis, and Jonathan are all here for you, available via cell phone or email. I know Jonathan popped his email in the chat. If you have any questions, howardhanna.com. Everyone else, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks,
with Howard
Thea.
Hanna and
Thank
Buffalo
you,
News.
Thea.
Thank you,
Bye,
Thea.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a great night.
Bye.